Hi, welcome to this look at the 14-day weather outlook. Things have been pretty quiet across the UK recently, but it's all set to change in the short term as wet and windy conditions return. The reason for that is a strengthening jet stream making a beeline towards the UK, as this chart shows quite nicely. It's at 21 GMT on Wednesday the 10th of March. We can see the UK somewhere here underneath this vivid shading which indicates the position of a jet stream. So that will be guiding disturbances in from the Atlantic in the short term at least. But is it set to stay that way? Well, the next chart I'll show is for Tuesday the 16th of March, and what we can see by then is that high pressure's building from the southwest and the jet stream's heading further north, and that's suggesting things could be turning more settled across the UK. But let's just focus on the short term to begin with. Here's a picture across the North Atlantic at 13 GMT on Tuesday the 9th of March. And we can see initially is that there's cloud and rain up to the northwest, just here making its way in towards the UK. And that's going to be pushing southeastwards fairly rapidly. And then there's further spells of rain moving in across the UK. And also look at the tightly packed isobars, especially on Thursday morning. Those are indicating the potential for very, very strong winds indeed, and there could well be some disruption around. I'll just show you the suggested gusts which some of the forecast models are currently predicting. This is from the Météo France model, and we can see gusts across central parts of Britain reaching over 60 miles an hour. We've got them going up to about 70 in places. It's less windy as you head further north, so it really is the southern half of the UK which is bearing the brunt at this time. This is at Thursday, the 11th of March at 07 GMT. Comparable chart, it's 06 GMT from the German model. It's also showing very strong winds. The gustiest conditions are out here to the west of the UK in Wales. But again, it's a very, very windy picture with those strong winds pushing across the country. The GFS model, this is 06 GMT on Thursday, the 11th of March, also shows a similar picture. The gusts on this one are not quite as strong, but we can see over much of England and Wales are over 50 miles an hour. So there could well be some disruption around during that period. And certainly in exposed coastal locations and high ground, that's where the strongest winds are going to be, particularly in the west. So we could see 60 to 70 miles an hour in those areas. With all that wind around, temperatures aren't going to be the main concern, but there could be a little bit of frost around at times. This is 06 GMT on Friday the 12th. Remember, the winds are lighter from the north of the UK at that point, generally by then, and it's shown the possibility of some frost in Scotland at least. Daytime temperatures, well, initially mild, but as those weather fronts push through and clear the country, we will be pulling in somewhat colder air from the west. It may in fact be cold enough for sleet or snow at times in the north, even down to lower levels possibly. So we can see here the daytime temperatures on Friday, the 12th of March. These are maximum forecasts from the GFS. They're not quite into double figures, but it does have a tendency to under forecast by a degree or two, but we can see 9s, 8s there, 7s. So not too far off a seasonal average by then. And as I say, a little bit chillier in the north. Looking a little further ahead, so we'll take this from Friday the 9th, this sequence. This is using different data, but we can see it's starting with a very showery picture. I think you can also see on here there's the potential for white shading showing snow, so we can see the risk of snow possibly over, as I say, over Welsh mountains and over high ground further north, and even at lower levels perhaps in Scotland. Now, I've just run this to see how it progresses, and it's a showery pitch to begin with. But as we go through the weekend, if you see high pressures beginning to build up from the southwest, so by Tuesday the 16th of March, it's starting to look like a more settled picture again, with maybe still a little bit of cloud and maybe a few showers around, some patchy rain, but generally becoming more settled as that high pressure builds in. So does that set the theme for the longer term? Well, there's a number of different scenarios on offer. This is the cold one. It's from the ECM model, the European model, and this particular chart we're looking at is valid for Friday the 19th of March, and what we can see here is this cold air pushing down from the northeast across the UK. And that is certainly a possibility, but most models are not supporting it, so it's unlikely, it's just a possibility. This is from a Canadian model, and it's possibly maybe will be turn out to be closer to the mark. What we can see is high pressure building in there from the southwest across the UK. We've got less cold air across the UK as well as a result of that. But again, the trend there is towards more settled conditions. And at the same time, approximately, we've got the GFS model, which is going for high pressure to be building quite strongly across the UK. Not particularly cold at all, and if anything, even more settled. So to just take that longer term outlook a little bit further forward, let's have a look at some of the ensemble data. This is showing surface level pressure forecasts. It's a daily summary for London for the next 16 days. Each column representing one of those 16 days, and it's showing how many runs in the ensemble model are forecasting a particular pressure pattern. So what we can see in the short term is there's greens and yellows there, which are indicating low pressure becoming dominant, some blues. But then as we go further forward, the amount of yellow and orange shading increases, and that's indicating, at least for a period, that high pressure will be becoming more influential, hence the likelihood of it turning drier. But if we just look towards the end of the forecast period there, the end of 16 days, there is high pressure beginning possibly to lose its influence once again. So perhaps at the very end, another change underway. Similar picture here for Glasgow. The trends are all much the same. Low pressure in the early on, high pressure becoming dominant, and then possibly low pressure returning later. What that means in terms of precipitation, it's likely to be rainfall, as I say, in the southern half of the UK at least, is that in the short term we can expect quite a bit of rain. The blues, greens and purples on this are indicating rainfall. But then the greys, which are becoming increasingly dominant, especially the light greys, which indicate computer model runs showing dry conditions throughout that time slot, increase. Just at the very end of the 16 days there is perhaps that tendency for it to become slightly wetter again. The comparable plot for Glasgow, it's a similar trend, plenty of runs showing rain in the short term. We then see this drying trend, and then towards the end again, perhaps a more marked upturn towards wetter and less settled conditions. Where does that leave things in terms of temperatures? Well, I'll use a 2 metre temperature. So I often use upper level air temperatures, but I think at the moment I'll use a 2 metre temperatures. At this time of year, they can often be a better guide. And what we can see is in the short term, it's greens, which is indicating relatively mild conditions. And then we see more yellows appearing, milder still. But then towards the end, perhaps the yellow is just tailing away a little bit, and there may be a downward trend in temperatures towards the very end again. Here's a Glasgow one. It's a similar pattern. So greens, there's some darker greens there, indicating the next banding downwards in temperatures. So we're further north here, obviously, than London, and the likelihood is temperatures are going to be a little bit lower. But then we see lighter greens appearing as we go forward, indicating milder conditions. Then at the very end, perhaps the darker greens there start to increase again. So possibly also turning colder towards the end. That colder ending is quite uncertain. As I say, we saw the ECM model going for a colder scenario, but that is in a minority at this point. So that's the next 16 days, but let's just take a sneak peek at the 35-day plots. I'll bring up the London one. On the left here, we've actually got precipitation, and on the right, 2-metre temperatures. The reason I brought up the precipitation one today was because there is actually a trend there towards the end as we go into the first week of April, perhaps even second week of April, for an increase in the amount of rain. You can see that red line there is increasing upwards. That's showing the average of all the runs. And in terms of temperatures, well, it's fairly average, would summarise it, as we go through the rest of March and into the early part of April. Quickly show you the Glasgow one, and again you can see there's ongoing risk of rain there. But on the temperature one, it's perhaps a little bit different, because later on, towards the end of March and into early April, it's perhaps a cooler trend there than there was on the London one, perhaps more of a deviation below the 30-year average. So it would again suggest the likelihood of colder conditions relative to the average is higher in the north of the UK than it is in the south. So to provide a summary of all that, where does it leave things? Well, initially, outbreaks of rain will push across all parts of the UK, and it will become very windy. In fact, there could be disruptive winds for a time, with gusts in exposed western locations reaching 70 miles per hour. As the rain clears through, it'll be very showery, and some of those showers could fall as sleet or snow over high ground in the west, and perhaps down to low levels in Scotland for a time. Towards the end of the first week, high pressure may well be building back in from the southwest as the jet stream heads north. That leads to the likelihood of drier conditions returning. So week 2 could begin quite settled, and that may continue for much of the period. After a rather mild start, there is a signal for temperatures to dip, so that would lead to an increasing chance of night frost with high pressure remaining in charge. 1 or 2 of the model runs are showing significantly colder conditions as we head through week 2, but those are in a minority at the moment. In the longer term, there's perhaps a signal for a northwesterly flow, at least across the northern half of the UK, to become more influential. If that happened, it would increase the risk of wintry conditions again in the north. So that's pretty much it. And again, if you enjoy this forecast and found it useful, please do remember to hit the subscribe and like buttons. I'm continuing to work on the presentation of these forecasts, so the graphics should continue to improve, fingers crossed, and hopefully the green screen techniques will continue to get better as well. Thanks very much for watching now. Bye.